Okay, this is where we left off on day 6 when we were working on the chainsaw and taking care of the bugs there. So now we're going to make this dresser interactive. We had added the dresser in, but if you go to the inside of it and look, there's actually no drawers on the inside. It's just an exterior mesh. So I want to add some drawers to the dresser, and I want to make the drawers animate so I can open and close them. First of all, I'm going to drag it out here where I can easily get to it. And I'm going to go ahead and use Probuilder to add the drawers to the dresser. So I need to go to Tools, Probuilder, and say Object, Probuilderize, or you can click on this icon right here, which does the same exact thing. So now that it's a Probuilder object, we can edit the vertices, lines, faces, and I'm going to start by selecting all of the faces on the drawer. So now that I've selected all the faces of the drawer, I'm going to go over here to my tools menu, and the tools menu is broken up into a couple different areas. They do it by color, you could see, and the color here has the orange has to do with the material and the texture, the UV. So tools to do with that, like the UV editor here, and then the blue has to do with selecting and tools to help you select, and then the green is objects, so functions and tools that deal with entire objects. The red part is what you have selected. So right now, because I'm on face mode, the red are my face tools. So in my face tools, I'm going to go to this one right here, which says detach faces. And that's going to create a new object out of my selection. And here it is. So I will name this drawer, and the dresser is right here. So I'm going to call this prop dresser. So I got a dresser and a drawer. I'm going to go ahead and I see the center position for the drawer is way down there. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the object mode, and I'll click on this button, which is center pivot. So it's going to set the center pivot to the middle of it there. Now I'll go ahead and get that out of the way. And what I'll do is go to line selection mode on this object, back to the dresser, and I'm going to select the 4 edges there and hold down Shift to extrude this way, because that's going to make faces for the inside. Now I'm looking at the side here to make sure that's about the correct depth. And the other tool I could use, since I have these 4 lines selected, is down here in my line tools. I can click this one for fill hole, and that should create a face at the back as well. So now that I have the 4 faces created, we could UV map these quickly, but let's save the UV mapping for the very end. Well, no, let's do it now. I'm going to go to the UV editor, and I'm going to select this face right here. And I see that this is one texture, and then basically all of the assets in the pack are mapped onto this texture right here. So it's going into this color, which is the 5th color to the left. I kind of want to match that color, so if I select this face right now, I can see that it's this big. So if I press R to scale, I could bring that down really far and then move it with up here up into the 5th color to the left, and that should match the color there. Now it makes sense that it's going to be darker on the inside of the drawer. So for one, I want to make this face smaller because it's quite It doesn't need to be that big. It just needs to be fill up the entire area. So that should work fine. And I'm going to move it to a darker color. The third one from black. So I'm going to keep the UV editor window open because I'm going to use a tool called Auto Stitch, and that's by having the UV editor open, holding Control, and then clicking on a face. And you'll see what it does there is it just automatically stitches those faces together. So I'm going to auto stitch, and now we have the inside of the drawer UV mapped. So I'll close the UV editor for now, and we have the inside done, but we need to add the drawer to this part. So I'm going to go back to edge selection mode and just use a similar method. Get the 4 edges here, and we'll extrude those back. Now actually, before I do that, let me go back into object mode, and I'm going to move the dresser drawer to where it should be, and now back in line mode. If I select these lines, I'll have a better idea of where I am extruding, how far back I should be extruding to. So I'm going to extrude back again about that far. And back to object mode. Let me pull this object out now that we have the proper depth for it. And here we'll do like we did before. We could select the 4 edges and do fill hole. And another way to get that done would be just to select the bottom or the top edge or one of the edges and shift to extrude up and then line it up. The problem with that is you've got these extra vertices right here, and if you were to do that, we would have to select this whole area to get all the vertices there and weld those together. So select all the vertices, weld, and that's going to get rid of the extra vertex. So either way, we have the outside of the drawer done now. So this top face can actually be deleted, and then we need to make the inside of the dresser. So I'm going to select the top edge again, and I'm going to go to the scale tool, and I'm going to scale, but I'm going to hold down shift so I extrude while I scale. And I like this width here and here, but on the edges it's too wide, but we'll fix that in a moment. So I'm going to go back to the move tool, and I'm going to extrude down. And I'll look over here to know when I'm at a good spot at the bottom. And then I'll do the fill tool. And I'm going to go to this face selection mode and just move this so it looks a little bit nicer. And the drawer looks like it's completed, except the UV map. I will try to use, let's see, I want this color to match the trim color that goes around the top. And if I look at what color is being used right here, it looks like it is the 3, 4, 5, 6th color from, so the one here. So on this face, we're just going to scale it down quite a ways and move it up here into the 6th color. And I'm going to scale it even a little bit more. And now that we have that matching color there on the top, I'm just going to use the auto stitch tool to go around the edge. And for the inside, we'll go a little bit darker again. We'll match this interior color, which is the third one from the left. So I'll select this face, and again, let's just get that down all the way. And we'll move it up into the third color, and it could be smaller than that. And from here we can auto stitch around by holding Control. And I see the handles coming through on this side, so I'm just going to pull this face a little bit more. So I'll do the same thing here, I guess. And the drawer is not complete because the outside isn't done. I'll have the outside match. We'll just match this color right here. Whoops, there we go. Auto stitch. I think the outside should have a dark color, so I'm going to select this face, this one, and this one, and this one. Somehow we got those in there. And I want to move these into a darker color. Hey, wait a second. Something's getting left behind. It's because I got auto stitched from here. So what I could say is split UVs, and then it will let me, whoops, then it will let me move it. And I'll move it here into this dark area. And this one's getting kind of close to the edge, so I'll move it back to the middle. Okay, the dresser drawer is looking good. Let's move it back into where it belongs, which is right about there, I guess. And now we want to animate it. There's a couple ways to do that. I'm going to use the animator and an animation controller. So with the animator, we can select an object like the dresser drawer. And it's important that I set up the parent-child structure now, because if I animate its transform is different if it's a child than if it's out here as a root object. So because I have the prop dresser, I want the drawer to be a child, and that puts it a lot closer to 0, 0, 0. And now I'll animate based on this position. So on my animator, I'm going to say let's see, what do we do? I need to go to animation, the animation window, which is accessible from window animation. And we will create a new animation clip, and I'm going to call this drawer open. And we're going to add a property for the transform position. And at the beginning, it's all the way closed. However, if we were to go to the end of the animation, the drawer would be open to about here. So we could scrub through this animation and see how that looks. And because the animation for open is the same as close, we don't need to make a close animation. And we're all done animating. That was so hard. Such hard work. But that did create a animation controller, and I put it right here. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it controllers because it's in my animation folder. So I know that the controllers are for my animation controllers, and this is the controller, so I'll call it drawer controller, and I'll put that into the controllers folder. And so if I look at the drawer, I'll see the animator as the drawer controller, and it already has set the drawer open as the default animation. So I'm going to create a new state that's going to be called idle, and it has no motion, and we'll set this as the default layer. So by default, it does nothing. It plays no animation. There's a drawer open animation, and I'm going to create another state, and this one's going to be called drawer close. And ironically, it has the open animation, but we're going to play it at a -1 speed so that it plays the animation in reverse. And to help go between these different states, we're going to use a Boolean value called open. And if it's idle, we should go play the open animation if open is true. However, if open is false, we are going to play the drawer close animation. And hold up, because if the drawer open is true, we are going to play the drawer open animation. Now that the animation has been created, the animator controller has been created. We just need to control this somehow. So I'm going to add a component here, and I'll say drawer controller. And that's a new that's a new C# script. And the first thing we're gonna do in here is find our animator. We need a private animator, and that's my anim. I like to call that one because it's on my game object. And so at the beginning we'll say my anim is equal to get component animator, because that'll go out and find that animator, and that will allow us to have our own function that returns void that says open drawer, and we'll pass in a Boolean status, which is a true or a false of if we want to have that drawer opened. And then we'll just say my anim dot set bool, and we'll pass in our string name of open that we called earlier, and that Boolean value is going to be status. So whatever we pass into here, the animator is going to play. Now this open correlates right here to this value that I made. Now that we have done all of this, if we were to add a component to the drawer called interactive object that we've already discussed in a previous day on this series, and interaction is enabled, and then I add a event trigger, which has an event for the pointer down or the pointer click, and in the pointer down we add a new event for the drawer controller, and we say drawer controller open drawer, and we have to set a bool here. Now that's not very good, because I just want to call it open drawer, and if it's open, open it, and if it's open, close it, and if it's closed, open it. So we'll just have a private bool called open status, and by default it's going to be false, which is closed. And then we're just going to set the bool. We'll say open status is equal to the opposite of open status. So it's just going to flip those back and forth. If one was, if it was false, it's going to become true, and if it's true, it's going to become false. And then we'll just set the bool right there on the animator to whatever the open status is. That way, I could come into here, and I could just call the open drawer function, and it will toggle back and forth between the open and close state. Now I can watch what's going on. Right now it's in the idle state, and I can't do anything because it doesn't have a collider. So let me just add a box collider quickly. And okay, it's opening. And something really bad is happening because when you create an animation like that, the default is to loop it, and I don't want it to loop the animation. I just want it to play. And before I forget, let's add that box collider again. There we go. And we should be able to open and close the drawer now, so let's see what happens. If I look at it for 3 seconds, it should open up automatically. And if you continue to look at it for 3 seconds, it should close and open. Now, I want to try clicking on it, but the problem is, well, there's a couple problems. The animator, for one, has been set to has exit time, which means it's going to play the entire animation before it lets you switch back to the other one. And that's no good because I want to be able to close the drawer halfway while I'm opening it. There we go. That's better. And the problem is the screen's bouncing all around because auto walk is getting triggered. So the next thing I'm going to tackle right now is going to be, if I'm looking at an interactive object, I don't want my auto walk script to move because on my VR main I got the VR auto walk, and if I do the fire 1 button, I'm going to move forward. However, I got the interactive object, and if I do a fire 1, I want it to fire the interactive object action, not do fire 1. So to make things, I think the best way to do this is going to be with tags. And anything that's going to be an interactive object is going to have its own tag. Let's just call it interactive. So it's going to have an interactive tag. So the drawer is interactive. And the axe is interactive. And the chainsaw over here is interactive, and this UI is interactive. I'll take care of that in a minute, but because we've set that to the interactive tag, what we're going to do when we do input fire 1, and I want to find out what the current game object is in the event system. So the input module is the gaze input module, and the pointer data has the pointer current raycast game object, because essentially what I would have to do right here is do a raycast from the camera, see what it hits, check the tag. If it's not interactive, go ahead and let you do a movement. But I'm already raycasting with the gaze input module. So what I'm going to do here is in the AutoWalk script, I'm going to say private gaze input module in the start we'll do gaze input module is equal to capital G game object dot find game objects of type, and I need to say find object of type because object is not going to return an array, and I know there's only one gaze input module in the scene. So gaze input module is equal to gaze game object dot find object of type gaze input module. Now we should have access to that, but the pointer data is not public. So I'm going to make this public pointer event data, And to make sure that doesn't show up in the inspector, I'm going to say hide in the inspector. And because it's public, I should be able to have access to the pointer event data. And better yet, I'm going to take this back. We're going to go back to the private here on the pointer event data, and we're going to make a public game object at gaze. And that public game object is already getting set on an earlier modification to the gaze input module I did, where one's defined here, game object at gaze. So I can take away this game object because it's already been defined. And that should just be a capital O. And it's possible the game object at gaze is going to be null, so I'm going to say game object at gaze is null. And that way I have access to the game object at gaze. I can say if the gaze input module dot game object at gaze dot tag, and this tag might be null because if I'm not looking at an object with the input module, then it's going to be null, which I'm going to get a null reference exception. So maybe instead of saving, I think I'm going to go back again on what I'm using for the public variable here, and we're going to say public string game object at gaze tag. So this is going to be the tag for the game object at the gaze. And to make sure that it's never null, we're going to initialize it like this. So it's not going to be null, but it could have a value of nothing. And so what we'll say is when it does the game object at gaze, we're going to have to define it here again. And then real quickly, we'll say if there is a game object at the gaze, then let's just set the game object at gaze tag is equal to the game object at gaze dot tag. And that string value should be reset. That way, if it is null, it returns back as this. So we're just going to say game object at gaze tag is equal to quote quote, which is a string of nothing, but it's not null. It's not going to give us a null reference exception if we try to return this value. It's going to just return a string of nothing. And so if there is a game object, then the tag is going to be the tag. And that tag is a public string. So over here in VR AutoWalked, we don't have to check for any of this. We're just going to say if the gaze input module dot game object at gaze tag is equal to interactive. So that's the interactive layer. And then do something. In this case, we're going to want to not do this. Not allow to check for the input fire 1. So we'll just put an explanation point here, and this is if that doesn't work. So we just put it right here, not equal to. So if the gaze input module's game object tag is not equal to interactive, then we're allowed to make a movement. And going back into the editor now, if I look at my drawer and I see that it has the interactive tag, it should work unless I've made a mistake, which happens all the time. So if I'm looking at the drawer, sure enough, I'm not walking, and then if I look away, I get a walk again. But if at any time I'm looking at an object that has the interactive script, like this one, it doesn't let me walk. So I can open and close the drawer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something inside of the drawer, believe it or not. Here's a sword, so I'm going to place the sword into the drawer. It's quite too big, so I'm going to press R and scale it down somewhere around 0.4 it looks like. And then zoom in so I can place it right onto the bottom of the drawer. And I could go a little bit bigger than that. And I'm going to make the sword a child of the drawer so that it opens and closes with the drawer. And I'm going to make the sword an interactive object. And I'm going to make the sword a pickup object so I can pick it up. And then I'm going to add an event trigger to the sword. And on the event trigger, I'm going to say pointer down. We want to have a new event for the pickup object, which is move to player's hand. Now I'm going to need to set an offset here. And another thing I did, which I made a mistake in the previous videos, was on the main camera for the hand mounting position. Previously I had the hand mounting position rotation some random value like this, and so I've since set that to 0 as it should be, because when I was picking up the chainsaw and the axe in the previous videos, this game objects had a strange random rotation that should have been 0, 0, 0. So now that that's done, I'm going to need to put this back to where it came from. And actually the animation would have moved it back into place anyways, but I could open up the drawer and I can't select the sword. It doesn't have a box collider on it. Oh, it sure does. That's the drawer. We need a box collider down here on the sword, so that we can come around here, open up the dresser drawer, and get the sword out. But I can't get the sword out because the collider for the drawer is covering up the drawer is covering up the collider for the sword. So on the collider for the drawer, I will have to I'm just going to click this button here to edit the collider, and I'm going to move this towards the front so that you have to look essentially at the front of the dresser drawer. I don't think that I'll be able to see a difference from the player's standpoint. So let's see how it looks. Now that drawer is pushing me out of the way, which is making the jerky camera movement. So I'm going to set the drawer to a trigger so that it doesn't push me around. I should be able to walk up pretty close to that and still open up the dresser drawer. And in that case, it must be the sword that's pushing me. So we're going to make the sword a trigger as well. And let's see if we got this thing working yet. Good, I can walk right through it. Now what I would like to do is go to the dresser and add a box collider to the dresser. So that I can't walk through it. And of course, that's not letting me raycast onto the drawer. So we'll go to Edit Collider here and just get this a little bit back past the dresser drawer so that the dresser drawer can be triggered. And I think we'll have some success here. I can walk up to the dresser, look down at it, open up the drawer, and there is an outline on the sword, and I'm going to I know about this problem already from trying to make this video, and this is just how Unity works with colliders as far as I could tell. I'm going to show you the solution that I've come up with, and because when I was looking at the sword, it was also selecting the parent, and it was showing the outline on this and this, and that has to do with I couldn't solve it. I got really down into the gaze input module, and where it's dealing with the process where it's casting a ray from the gaze and updating the current object, and so when it updates the current object, that's where it goes and it looks at what is selected from the pointer data. And all of my tests said that it should only be selecting the sword. But the problem is this drawer does have an event trigger on it. And the event trigger is looking for a collider. It has to have that collider to know if something's entered in to the trigger. And a game object doesn't really care if a collider is on itself or if the collider is on a child. So I'm not 100% been able to solve this back to the root cause of it, basically in the input module, because I don't know if it's possible because of how Unity works with colliders and colliders on children. So in other words, because this one has a interactive object and a collider on it with the event trigger, and this has a collider as a child, this collider on the child is going to go up and trigger the events on this event trigger. So to get around all of this, the interactive object has a Boolean called interaction enabled, which just turns on or off interaction. So all we're going to do is if we have an interactive object that has interactive objects as children, then the children need to do a special thing. It's two new event types. It's the pointer enter and the pointer exit. And so on pointer enter, you want to bring the parent into here, and the pointer exit, bring the parent into here. And so again, I'm on the sword event trigger, and I'm saying on my parent, the drawer, when the pointer enters, let's do interactive object, interaction enabled, false. And that turns off this bool right here. So if I look at the sword, turn off the interaction on the parent drawer. And then when the gaze leaves, or so when the pointer exit, then we can go ahead and tell the interactive object to turn the interaction back on. And with it set up like that, I should be able to walk over to the drawer, walk up to it, bump into it, look down at it, or be at any distance from it. Click to open, click to close. But if I let that drawer open all the way up, and I look at the sword, and I want to make his outline bigger, so that's just a variable on the interactive object, outline width. You'll see that the outline for the drawer is not triggering now, but I can individually trigger the drawer and the sword. So I could close the drawer here, open it back up, and the sword item itself, if I click on it, there we go. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more VR development coming up right here. And remember, if it's helpful, you like the video, give it a like, share it, and subscribe. See you guys soon.